Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. And there's usually four of us. I'm John Petersen from the Arlington Institute, and Gregg Braden usually joins us, but he's committed in Arizona today. But we're happy to have Penny Kelly with us from Michigan. Hi, Penny.
Hello, good to be here. Very good to see all of you again. And I
And
hope Greg isn't being committed to something something
I
psychic.
think they'll release him this afternoon, maybe.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
And Kingsley from England. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you, John. Hello, Penny, and I'm always committed. But they released me today.
All right.
So let's talk about our subject today. We're running up this kind of escalator into a space that is really going to be quite different than what anything we've all seen before. And you have these kind of wild cards, these disruptions that are an integral part of this kind of studded like a plum pudding or some other kind of thing in the middle of all of what's going on down in this direction. But one of them that I wanted to talk about today is life extension. There is a great deal of significant amount. I mean, the industry is now over, multiple billions of dollars a year, all pointed toward life extension. The elimination of, I guess they call it senescence is the general term for the area of study. But it's all about using various types of kind of models and biological experiments and so on to try to figure out what it is that makes us all die, the one we kind of commonly do. It's an interesting kind of and a useful question for lots of reasons, not least of which is because what biologists say is that the body intrinsically could live for 1,000 years. There's nothing about the biology that per se that makes it wear out. There's something else going on. And of course, lots of folks have talked about telomeres or telomeres and how that they shorten and what are ways in which you can lengthen them. There's research being done all over the place. They're being amazingly kind of successful, and it's really surprising in some places what they've discovered using these other organisms, plants, animals, whatever they are, insects, and so it seems like that all of this is going to work its way into the drugstore on your corner, right? One of these times. Fairly soon. I went to a workshop and to a breakout session that was run by Peter Schwartz. That's the first time I'd ever met Peter Schwartz. And Peter Schwartz, I remember distinctly saying, I have a son that's 3 years old or something like that. And I believe that he's going to live to be 150 or 200 years old because there is a point in the not too distant future where the technology and the science will always make a year's worth of advances in longevity every year, so that you end up kind of staying. You get more extension the longer that you live, which essentially keeps you the same and perhaps even moves you back to an earlier age. The whole system that we have, as humans, have developed, particularly in the West, and that supports us all, is all based on people kicking off at 70 or 80 or 90 years. And so if you suddenly have people that are living, say, twice as long, 140, 150 years, you have some really deep kind of structural problems and kind of practical kind of terms, because there's all things about the psychology, which we want to talk about a little bit here too. But in really structural terms, it's kind of a long-term mess. I mean, it's exacerbated right now by the fact that you have Eric Schmidt, who used to run Google, 5, 7 years ago saying that in 10 or 12 years, 85% of all the jobs that exist right now will be obsolete because of what technology is doing. So you're running out of jobs to support the kind of the workforce that exists right now. And if you layer into that a double, some significant kind of percentage of additional kind of people that are still alive and you need something to do, then you got a serious kind of problem.
We had life that went to 130, 140, 150, 60, 70 years. And that was well known in the old ones of ancient Europe, over in the Ukraine, in the mountains, the Ural Mountains. They had people who lived, I think, Abkhazia, I'm not sure how you say it, but those people lived easily, regularly, to 160 years of age. They didn't marry or take a partner until they were 80. This was a guy in England, and his name, this was 1483. So, and I'll just mention that when I've gone back to look and see clairvoyantly, what are people doing? How are they living? Way back before the industrial age came along and everybody left the land and went into the cities, people were living to extraordinary old ages, and they were in good shape. So here's Englishman Thomas Parr was a farmer most of his life. He's buried in Westminster Abbey alongside kings, queens, poets, and other noble dead. Today you can still see his small headstone. There's a picture of it here depicted above, embedded in the wall of Westminster. And why did he merit this exalted burial? His claim to fame is that several documents prove, that he was 152 years old. When the church investigated the parish register in his native village, claimed he was baptized in 1483. A marriage document proves he took a wife in 1563 at age 80, and still another certificate attests that he married a second time in 1605 at the age of 122. And then lastly, church records show Thomas Parr doing penance and paying a fine for fathering an illegitimate child at age 105. So we have degenerated and tremendously in terms of our health, in terms of our longevity. There have been points where life expectancy is down to 47. Now we're talking about 150. When I came in this time, I expected, and I told everybody in my family, I'm going to live to be 147. And they laughed. So what have I learned in the meantime? If we change the longevity of the human being, we change everything. That is a different paradigm. And so we're talking about moving into not the kind of thinking that asks, well, how do we find enough jobs? How do we find stuff for old ones to do? Old ones are holding things together. They're alert, they're active, they're physically fit. I had this extraordinary experience when I was 12 that introduced me to the concept of power. And I understood from that point on that people in the government went into that because they wanted power. Implications of living to 150 years depends on whether we're talking about implications backwards or implications forward. Okay, so the backward, if we want to live to be 150 years old, we have to go backward to deal with becoming more healthy, more resilient physically. We would have to be in harmony with nature's laws, because you cannot violate nature and live, period. The implications of going forward, we would have the benefit of greater wisdom and experience, and we wouldn't have 40 and 43-year-olds running the government. That's pretty darn young. I don't think people are even begin to be ripe until they're 50. We would have greater homeostasis in our civilization because there would be homeostasis in us. We would completely reorganize the whole paradigm, everything, government, medicine, education, food, money, blah, 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 blah. We would give up the idea of pensions and retirement. Who thought that up? At what point do you sit in the rocking chair and contribute nothing?
Yes, it's quite a paradoxical question, because we're talking about the implications of uh, living longer, longevity, at a time when there's certain forces in the world counteracting human evolution and possibly, having an aim to reduce the population and the impact of humanity on the planet. And so, to speak of the question of living longer, I'm going to talk about it, yes, in a kind of sociological perspective, but also in the context of the current conditions upon the planet. And the question, therefore, in the current conditions, comes across, and I think is popularized and promoted as purely a materialistic question. These people are pure materialistic scientists. And in fact, you would go as far to say that Aubrey de Grey and Ray Kurzweil are blatant transhumanists, And so, and a lot of the tech companies that are talking about longevity and doing the research for this are also focusing on the material question. I do feel that there's a great connection to the increase in industrialization and materialism on the earth right now that's impacting this question and could also take it in a certain direction. As you said, John, it's not just a physical resource question. It's a psychological question. I think already there are many people struggling with the question of what is human purpose? What is my purpose to be alive? And although Penny mentioned that there are many great people who after a certain age become really dynamic, become the wise elders, I think we have to recognize that majority of people are not the wise elders. They retire, they lose a purpose to live. They don't become cultural creatives. They just get the remote, sit in front of the TV, and then, just kind of just slop out on whatever, What's-its, crisps and the TV. So there's going to be this large number of people that may not have a purpose, because in order to align with a different trajectory of lifespan, you have to completely realign reality and the social cultural construct. Humanity has been conditioned to grow up with a fear of death. Not only a fear of death, but again, the materialistic paradigm that we're only living one life. So if you're conditioned and programmed to believe that you only get one shot at it, this is your life, and then you're gone, of course, naturally, you're going to want to live longer. You want to have a greater stab at making something from this one shot. But the question is, death is not the end. And if we can have an understanding that death is a transitional moment, then people may not want to live longer, because, nature has its course. Summer passes on to autumn and winter. If there was no death in nature, no winter, the seeds would not go into the earth, regenerate, and rebloom again. So the question is, death is necessary. If the human soul could not be released from its human body, go back into, let's say, the spirit realms, have a post-life understanding of what it's learned, what it hasn't learned, what elements are potential in the next life, and then come back. You have the regeneration of spirit in the human body. And if the spirit is tied to human body that doesn't want death because the smaller mind has been programmed to live forever, and the spirit can't be released, what kind of conflict are you going to have there?
If you work with or talk with beings from other places, they live much longer. 250, that's considered a very short life. Some of them live 1,200, 1,500 years. Okay, so they have figured out something. And what is their commitment? It's to make a better world.
you had large scale kind of life extension, you would have to have revolutions in agriculture that allowed you to, all other things being equal, that allowed you to produce far more food and far more efficiently. And there's a revolution, a literal revolution that's going on now in terms of agriculture.
You say it could be so much better for everyone, but before we can get to the question of the longer lifespan, we have to change the whole foundation of human society. Maybe part of this complete transformation we're going through towards this potential new world will be the impetus to start that, because in order to get agricultural systems at a point where they can feed a nutritional system into the world, you've got to get rid of all the agribusiness, which controls all the farming futures, the grain futures, all the commodities. So, you need a huge shift on a lot of systems before you can start putting in these incremental systems that will help to bring a foundation for a longer lifespan in humanity.
We encourage you strongly to come to our website, to arlingtoninstitute.org, and you can come to the Quartet page and see some of the other things that we're doing here in our little resort town in West Virginia. We have a speaker series called Transition Talks, and Penny has been there, and Gregg comes, and we're trying to get Kingsley extricated out of England to get over here. But that's it. Anyway, we have a variety of things that I think you'll find interesting. So check out transitiontalks.org. So as we close today, and by the way, leave a comment. There are some questions, and that'll give us something to talk about again at the beginning of our show next time.
Well, predictions based, I think there's going to see a lot more issues around sanctions on Russia. And especially from a European basis, it's going to be strongly around the fuel and natural gas, because Europe is so dependent on that. And I think we're going to see European wrangling and positioning over the strengthening of Europe, of the sanctions on Russia. But my major prediction is that on Saturday, the 14th of May, over 300 million people are going to see live Ukraine win the Eurovision Song Contest.
Win the what?
The Eurovision Song Contest.
Oh.
I don't often get this prediction right, but I feel that Ukraine will win it, and if they do, then it's pure political voting.
Yes, absolutely. They'll win it whether they win it or not. Penny.
Oh, wow. Well, you know what? I haven't looked ahead very much because I'm so busy looking at what is. But I have been really, I'm kind of noting how many people are talking about gardens, planting a garden, asking questions about gardening. Where do I get seeds? Where do I get this? What about that? On and on. So I think that we're going to see a huge wave of people growing a lot of their own food over this. Maybe not the next 2 weeks, but really just getting it started. Up here in the north, it's a little bit early yet. Down in the south, it's probably almost past time. So there's some of that. And then I think the other thing is, I think that I don't think it's going to be completed in the next 2 weeks, but the awareness of the change, of the difference between what we've heard about Ukraine and what is the truth about Ukraine is going to begin to sink in to people. And there's some more that I could say, but it's really a whole subject all its own. I just think that is going to be a huge wake-up call, massive, all of a sudden massive. So we'll see.
Thank you. I mean, last 2 weeks ago, I predicted that the Ukraine war would be over by now, and I missed that one in terms of time, but I'll predict it again that 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
By 2 weeks from now, Putin will have mopped things up, and it will have smoked out the folks that are buried under the steel plant, and Mariupol. Is that what it is? Mariupol.
Mariupol, yeah.
And
whatever.
He is going to try to clean this thing up and get it to the end because he needs to. And at the same time, you've got the whole West is importing weapons and money over there for a rapidly diminishing army that is increasingly incapacitated. So thank you all, and thank you for being with us, Kingsley and Penny. And thank all of you who are viewers and with us, and come back and visit us in another couple weeks. And we'll have another topic that has to do with the big change that's going on in the world.